Hi everybody, and welcome back to the 20 Years of Women on Boards podcast with me, Claire Braund, the co-founder and CEO of Women on Boards. Today we're talking to Chris Franks, a company director with experience on a wide range of boards across the APRA-regulated private, government and not-for-profit sectors. Chris has spent a huge 35 years volunteering in the international development sector, for which she was awarded a Member of the Order of Australia, AM, in 2020 for services to the community through social welfare initiatives, and an Australian Council for International Development Award for outstanding service to the aid and development sector. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Lovely to be talking to you, Claire.
Thanks, Chris. Chris, you started your working career as a registered nurse at Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney. What made you choose nursing as a career? And can you tell us what made you realise that this was not going to be your lifelong profession?
Well, I actually started out in the UK. I came from a very small village, no money for uni in our family. So I could either be a nurse, a teacher, or work in the local wire factory, and decided that nursing was the way to go. I came over to Australia thanks to that, and North Shore is where I worked. I found it a really fascinating area. I worked in the operating theatres. I did every sort of surgery that was possible, but it didn't quite satisfy me. I wanted to do more. I wanted to be part of a bigger thing, and being in an operating theatre each day wasn't terribly exciting. I was also incredibly opinionated. I know you'll find that very funny, and headstrong, and that didn't go down with the medical model at that time, and I was just too young and inexperienced to really move into management. So I headed off into working for 2GB. And so that really was an eye-opener for me. At that stage, it was a very well-respected news and talk format, introduced to some degree by 2GB. My shock when I got there was how slowly everybody moved and worked. I couldn't believe it. After working in an operating theatre where you're literally running all day long and you never stop, it was an eye-opener. It was also an eye-opener that the egos there were as big as those of the doctors I'd worked with. But I learnt lots. I learnt that the way to sell radio was relationships, of course, mainly because that's how I worked in nursing. Relationships were everything. And today, for me, relationships are everything.
It was an interesting era because you had, when you talk about those major personalities, it was the sort of Sydney radio wars kick off. It was court cases. There were shake-ups around the format. You had like all the major characters, you know, Mike Carlton, Darren Hinch, Ray Hadley, Alan Jones and John Laws. It was a pretty testosterone-fueled environment.
It surely was, absolutely. And it was one where you had to be confident. If you didn't look confident, they'd basically crush you. And we lived and died by the ratings. And before long, I got very bored with selling as well, and I moved to work with the research manager, which was fascinating, and we were working out how to track audiences so that we could tune the broadcasts before the actual ratings came out. So that was fascinating, learning about that. I went around to a few of them. It was Macquarie Network at that stage, went around to a few cities and put in audience tracking. Those were in the days when 99% of people would answer your survey. Very different today. And I loved research. So that was the next step of my career, going into that, doing a degree. I loved the fact that the big egos, I only saw them on ratings days, and they'd be down in our very small office and they'd be picking through, trying to find every little piece of information. And then, of course, they'd be at the very loud alcohol-fueled ratings parties. And, less said about that, the better.
So you've both worked and served on the board of a wide range of large charitable organisations across your career, including the Starlight Foundation, Save the Children New South Wales, Oxfam Community Aid Abroad, the New South Wales Heart Foundation, Family Planning New South Wales, Habitat for Humanity and Results International. What attracts you to the aid and international development sector? Why does this work matter to you?
Well, it matters because that's how I was brought up. And I came from a family that was always involved in community activities. You know, we were expected to be out there at the weekend. At that stage, it was the Red Cross doing first aid at gymkhanas and that sort of thing. So when I finished uni, it was sensible for me to go, okay, now how do I give back? I've got this fabulous education. I have to do more than just work somewhere. And so I had, I was donating to organisations, and I did a lot of research, which is what I still do today when I look at organisations. What do they do? How do they do it? How do they invest money? Who supports them? And I chose Oxfam as one to really get involved with at that time. And I then was also working at Choice Magazine, Australian Consumers Association, as their research director. That was another step. And I did a little bit of policy work, and they put me onto a parliamentary committee that was looking at the aid and development sector. Fascinating to get really quite deeply into the sector and learn so much more about it. I became chair of their Code of Conduct Committee, and I really enjoyed the standards, the policies, and all of those side of things. But that also then opened up more boards once I left that role. And so for me, it's always been giving back, doing what I can for the wider community.
Yeah, it's interesting how much where we grew up and how we grew up informs where we land and how we think and those values that really drive us. So because what you're saying is that the way you grew up really informed the way you then carried on in your career and in your board work.
Absolutely.
So you both founded and then chaired Women in Aid and Development. Can you tell us why you started the organisation, who it supports and what it does on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I was working also on mutual financial boards at that stage. So I worked at Southern Cross, I think it's called now, Great Southern Bank, it was called CUA. And when I was there, I was getting lots of stuff in my inbox, which was telling me about leadership and boards and governance and all of the things I was interested in. But I realised that there was nothing being done in the aid and development sector. And that mainly was because there's no money. You know, they operate on the smallest of margins and professional development is way down the bottom. And so I thought, well, if all these wonderful people are giving me all this fabulous information, I'll share it. And so I put a website up and I organised people to come and meet and come to listen to a speaker and find out about the sector, but also, really importantly, find out about the fact that at that stage there were very few women in the leadership positions and hardly anyone on boards, but the majority of the people working in the sector are women. So it seemed logical to me to encourage. And also I really was aware of the imposter syndrome that was there. Huge amount of people who really didn't believe in themselves and really thought that the whole area was run by men and that was the way things should be. So I was just very happy to disabuse some of them of that. So I really, it started very organically, very small meetings. And then we had a call from Canberra to say, oh, well, can you do it here? And then Melbourne, can you come down here? So we run networking events. We have great speakers from the sector and we run with volunteers. It's a very small organisation. It has very much is supported by people who become members. And the bigger organisations in the sector do pay more than the little organisations, as is sensible. But that means that they're also supporting some of those smaller organisations that have very little money. And they're the ones that actually need more of the professional development and the networking and the support in the early stages of their career. Then we started a mentoring program. That was logical. And having been on the board of Habitat for Humanity, we had an observership program there and participated in that. And so we introduced one as well. So we always have an observer with our board each year. And we have a website that has information on it, on leadership and on personal development, which I think is really important. And the latest statistics now show that about 50% of the senior leadership roles in the sector are filled by women. However, there's still a long way to go because 80% of the people working in the sector are women. So from my point of view, we've still got a long way to go. And I think that the critical thing we also do is because we're a volunteer-run organisation, we do pay a few people, but most are volunteers. They come in and take a role, and it's one of the most common ways of getting into work in what is a very small specialised sector. And so, quite recently, our volunteer coordinator, who'd been with us for about 15, 18 months, has done a fantastic job. She just got a full-time role with the Mother's Day Classic in Melbourne, running thousands of volunteers. So those things can help, and any way that we can get women to be getting into what really makes their hearts sing is really what we want to do.
It's really interesting. It's sort of like a training ground, really, and it's exposing them to those networks, giving them access to the opportunities and access to the people who can make the key decisions. So, yeah, sounds amazing, Chris. Switching hats, your other major board roles, which you've actually referred to, are in the APRA-regulated member-owned for-purpose entities. You've had current and former directorships on Gateway Bank, Great Southern Bank, CUA Health, Credit Corp Insurance, and the SMSF Association, which, of course, is the Self-Managed Super Fund Association. So what do you like about governing member-owned organisations, cooperatives and mutuals, and what do you find challenging?
Well, what I like about them is their community and member stakeholder focus. That is absolutely the thing that comes onto the board table in everything that we do. In every decision we make, we need to know how does it affect the person at the end of the line. The ethical values, but for purposes, you said, it's very much also working with people who are motivated by those same values and those same aims. We know that at Gateway at the moment, we have one of the best teams in the universe, in my view. Very, very capable, incredibly competent people who constantly get asked if they will go and work for one of the big four banks or one of the secondary line banks. But they're there because they believe in what we're doing. They can do a great job for people and they can see their impact on people at the end of the day. And, it's a great place for people who've got families that we don't expect people to work 7 days a week, 14 hours, 16 hours a day. They actually can have a life as well. And so I'm very much motivated to see the benefit of the reinvestment of profits. That goes through to product, good product, and goes through to services so that people know that they're well looked after and that they can have an organisation that's looking after their money but also is looking after them. And that for us is really, really important. And I also think that there's a huge amount of trust and respect in those organisations. So people who work there know that they are being respected and they will be treated fairly. So that's really, for me, really important. But at the end of the day, everybody works in a very commercial way. There is no point sitting there and dragging through money. You actually have to be able to deliver and and build your assets and build what you're doing for the members.
You've had 20 years or 20 plus years really of governance experience across very different organisations, as we have touched on. So how has your understanding of what good governance means evolved over that time?
It's a very long time. I took my first board role in 1999, which is a long time ago. Transparency and accountability has always been the base. It is even more the base these days. People in governance are absolutely aware that we have to be completely transparent with what we do. And that definitely has evolved over time. Being driven by values is really, really important. Whether it's a mutual or a corporate, everybody needs to know that they're meeting those obligations. One thing that I've seen changed a lot is the role of the chair in governance. There's far more focus on the chair these days, far more understanding of the pivotal role that the chair plays in the success of the work of the board, the work of the organisation. Communication is so much more important as well. So I started way back in the days when mutuals in general were run by the CEO. The board was there they'd listen and they would have a nice meeting and a chat. But at the end of the day, the decisions that they made were minor or very little at all. It was the CEO who drove the big decisions, and that has changed dramatically. It is absolutely the board that are in the driving seat now, with a complete focus on strategic direction, knowing where the organisation's going, and much less dotting T's and crossing I's and correcting grammar in a board paper. So that is really important. Professionalisation, massive. It is now an expectation that someone will have an AICD course behind them or similar, so that they actually understand the shape of the role as they come in. And the other huge change is that there are women. When I first started out, I would go to events, except for WOB events, of course, and there would be maybe 2 women in the room, and men would just be looking over the top of your head, and they would be looking for the next person to talk to. So it was a really good thing that I was a little bit headstrong and a wee bit noisy in what I was talking about, so that I could actually talk to people and find out. I found those events so interesting in terms of learning. But now I go to events and there are absolutely loads of women and really good women who've got really good backgrounds and incredible education. And I'm quite I'm intimidated at times by the quality of women who are now sitting on boards. And I really think that, women have got such a good impact on boards. There's far more humanity in boards. There's much more focus, whether it's corporate or mutual. It's a focus on members. That's gone right up. It's also more respectful. It's far more educated. I was in a discussion the other day, and someone said, "Oh, look, when I run this training program, I have loads of women and not many men there." And they are seeing that on a regular basis, that women are the ones who want to learn. They want to know about AI. They want to know about cyber. They want to know about digital, which are all the current things. They do not see as many men come through, although on my board, of course, they're all very educated as well.
It's interesting you say that because, of course, the latest Gender Diversity on Boards report produced by Watermark was very interesting in that it looks at the ASX 300, which is about 2,090-something directors. And of those, 42% have a governance qualification. And of that 42%, 61% are women and 31% are men. So whether that's just a legacy issue or a hangover issue, and the education is in fact coming in, but it does also beg the question, is there a higher standard of governance for women required than there is for men sometimes? So it is an interesting one, that one.
Oh, it is an interesting one, but I would say women are really motivated. They really want to be across their brief. Yeah, I think there's probably a little of both.
So what conversations do you think boards need to be having but aren't? You talked about the things that are really topical, like the cyber and the digital and AI and the things that we need to really be across. But are there conversations that aren't being had at board level that should be?
I think one of my hobby horses is absolutely performance. And I think performance is absolutely essential to what we do. I think that it's very difficult sometimes for some boards to dig into that performance piece, to have a board evaluation that is a rigorous evaluation, whether that's internal or external, and then to actually have really tough conversations about what it is that is going right, and more importantly, what it is that isn't going so well and we need to address. And I've worked on some great boards that have really engaged with that and worked with that. I find that if you've got a performance issue on a board, it can take 18 months, 2 years to work it through. And I've worked on some boards with some massive issues that don't ever get raised or discussed. And that goes back, again, in my view, to what I said earlier. Chairs are pivotal in that area. I think that the thing that is really important is the board being aware of what impact are they having on the strategic objectives and the achievement of those, and being quite clear that employing a really good CEO is not where the buck stops. You have to be engaged with that stuff, and you have to be having those tough strategic conversations about where the organisation should be going.
We've mentioned earlier organisational purpose is a really clear driver in how you choose your board roles. For an aspiring board member, what are some of the tells that an organisation is only paying sort of lip service to purpose and not really living it out?
For me, one of the key things when I'm talking to an organisation is how do they frame the engagement with the CEO, the leadership team, and the staff? So if I ask a question about how they govern their culture, how are they engaged in building culture, that's an important one for me. Are they the sort of board that are attending a couple of events a year where there are all the staff there? I think, the Cancer Council morning tea and taking a cake along. Be seen to be open. I think that's really important. Another tell, I think, is the chair. Is the chair someone, when you talk to them, they are literally just talking about themselves and how they run it and what they do? Or are they talking about how they work with the board? Are they working and engaging other board members? Do they encourage board members to have their say on any issue that comes up? That's really important. And then how they are perceiving the organisation as operating. What are the values of the organisation? I have to say that it's really interesting that a lot of people can't tell you what the values